and more recent civilizations, humans feasted, food as well as drink, with the gods. With the terms libation and sacrifice, we're talking specifically about pouring things, drinks as well as food, like grain or milk or whatever, for the gods, and offering them meat and sometimes the smoke associated with burning bones. As Fred Neiden rightly puts it in the Oxford Handbook of Ancient Greek Religion, quote, libations and incense burning were far more common than animal sacrifice, if only because they accompanied most animal sacrifices, yet occurred also without them. In ancient as in modern terms, there's much less written about libation, the ritual pouring of a liquid or a grain. The noun libation, it's also the Latin libatio, of course, derives from the verb libare, to taste, sip, pour out, just make a libation, as an offering to the dead, or a heroized or divine spirit on the earth or an altar. Libations and human consumption of wine with other food and drink were performed with ancient Greek vases, like the ones we have in the Ure Museum, of which I'm curator. As with most museums, a pane of glass at the front stops us from touching, let alone turning the vases. Whether by glass, alarms, or some other trickery, museum curators rarely give scholars, let alone students, the chance to rotate, thus contemplate the actions in which the vessels were used. So please come visit us and we'll turn the vases for you. At the Ure, we've always welcomed students of all ages to handle ancient vases, although in this archival picture from the 1990s, perhaps there's too many school pupils at once. Sometimes, as in the case of this lekythos at Harvard, however, the image informs us about the use of the vessel, if not the same vessel on which it's decorated. In this case, with regard to libation. This rite required up to 2 vessels, a bowl, here exemplified by a small cup, or fiale, as it's known in the literature, and a jug. She's holding the fiale in one hand and the jug in the other. And this is a goddess Nike, who is the goddess of victory, by the way. See, there's a bowl and then the jug. For the bowl, any open vessel would or could be used in libation. Herodotus, sometimes called the grandfather of Greek history, who wrote in the 5th century BC, tells us as much in his story of the 12 Egyptian kings sacrificing at Hephaestus' temple, when he says, he who stood last of them, Psammetichus, had no fiale, so taking off his helmet, he held it out and poured the libation with it. Couldn't find a picture of Psammetichus doing that, but here's the gods Athena and Zeus doing the same thing. Another Greek from the same time, Pindar, declares, let him distribute in the silver fiale the strong child of the vine. Here is such a silver fiale in the Museo Galileo in Florence. And this vessel, now in Munich, has a warrior who shows us how to hold the fiale in the same way that an ancient writer, later, Pollux, that's his name, says, let them carry the fiale on the tips of their fingers, bringing them carefully to the banquet guests. Fialae have also been found in temple inventories, that is not just given to, but held by deities. This is the cult statue of Nemesis, Rhamnus, by a sculptor called Agoracratus in the 5th century also. And she held a fiale decorated with the Ethiopians in her outstretched right hand. Perhaps the Ethiopians were supposed to show her broad-reaching power. Nemesis, of course, means righteous retribution, getting back at your enemy. We know all of this because of the texts. Sadly, the original is lost, except for her head, which is in the British Museum now. While Nemesis fiale, like the rest of her figure, is long since lost, silver and even gold fiale, like this one, have been found. This is from Panegyriste in Bulgaria. As for our libation containers, the vases holding liquids to be dispensed, they're mostly small containers with single handles that allowed for pouring, like the lekythos on the oinokoi shown here. The texts, which hardly mention them, tell us about how they're used, but not necessarily what they look like. But the usage indicated on the pictures on the pots helps us a lot, as with the Harvard Nike that I showed you earlier. And this helps us imagine how you actually pour out from one into the other. Or they might pour onto an altar. Here comes Nike again, the goddess of the victory. You can recognize her with her wings. She's got a brazier, which is like a grill. that she might be using in connection with the altar. Here's an altar in the lower right. And even Apollo uses an altar. I hope you can see that there's lots of variations on the theme. But how do you do it? Take a cup, hold it out, pour the wine into it, tilt it, and then offer a prayer. How do we know this? There's collections of texts, especially those by Homer. This is how he has Achilles doing it in Book 16 of the Iliad. Therein Achilles had a fair-fashioned cup, something like the one I show you on the right, where from neither was any other man wont to drink the flaming wine, nor was he wont to pour drink offerings to any of the gods, save only to Father Zeus. This cup then he took from the chest and cleansed it, first with sulfur, and thereafter washed it in fair streams of water. And himself he washed his hands, drew flaming wine, and then made a prayer, standing in the midst of the court, and poured forth the wine, looking up to heaven, and not unmarked was he of Zeus that hurleth the thunderbolt. That is, he got Zeus's attention by grabbing a nice shiny cup, cleaning it himself and cleaning it very carefully, filling it with wine, with or without flames, and making a show in the central court. There's lots of words for libation and related things in ancient Greek. Too much to talk about today. Perhaps the most important, though, is spendo and its variants. Apospendo, I've written them in Greek here, but I'm saying them obviously in a way that you can understand, I hope. But there's also expendo, apospendo and expendo both mean to pour out. Epispendo means to pour on. Kataspendo means to devote or consecrate, like wine at a church. Suspendo means to join in making a libation and also making a treaty. As we've seen, we have it in a specialized ritual context very early on. We talked about Homer, and that was maybe from the 8th century or earlier. And it's no surprise, because before that, practically the same word, sipand, was used in Anatolia. They even used a variant of that word, ispandua, for the libation vessel. This and other images show the libation to the storm god, also specified in texts, and it's not unknown to have libated to him, that is, given him a drink with wine in a silver libation vessel. Again, we have lots of texts talking about that sort of thing. So the Hittite sipand maybe goes back even farther than our Greek spendo, used not just for making libations and consecrating, but also for sacrificing. But why? Why are we giving a gift to the god? A gift of drink or food. One might give a god some silver plate or a nice shiny cup, a nice vase to keep the treasury in and lists in the inventory, something like the tamata. These are shiny gifts that are given to gods and especially to saints in modern Greek religion. But the libation is all about show, at best something shown to the god, a token, a gesture, a symbol, a show, an invitation. A cross-cultural perspective reminds us that traditional African religions share with Greco-Roman religions the ritual of pouring wine, as shown here on the Ivory Coast, not just at the funeral, but at other times, as appropriate in giving homage to the ancestors. It's in pouring this libation, in fact, that they invite the ancestors and the gods to participate in public functions. The Egyptians make it look so easy. For them, as for many Africans today, a libation was primarily a drink offering to honor the dead and please the divinities. The role of the divinities as witnesses is specified in Utterance 598 of the coffin texts, the so-called Book of the Dead. Following the instruction to pour libation for your father and mother who rest in the valley of the dead, the sacrificer is told, God will witness your action and accept it. Do not forget to do this, even when you are away from home. For, as you do for your parents, your children will also do for you. In fact, ancient Greek libation serves many of the same purposes as African libation, honoring or summoning the gods, heroes or dead, as in Homer's Odyssey, marking time, as in Hesiod's works or days, and in fact, divine favor, or begging divine favor. And we have an example of that, for example, in Euripides' Baccha. We've also got propitiation and signing truces, as I mentioned earlier. But what is poured? The libation is, at essence, the drop or stream of liquid or grain being offered. What is it? We might see foodstuffs or grain on an offering plate, White ground vessels, like this cup in Delphi, give us a chance to see and appreciate the liquid. In this case, not the dark red we'd expect from blood or wine, but an orangey red, a liquid form of honey, or maybe dilute rosé wine. In case of honey, an oil, or honey or oil, a drop would be enough. If dropped on an altar, it would sizzle and that way enhance the show. It's some of the other foodstuffs that we have: grain, wine, blood, honey, oil, water. I have another image um, of pouring a libation. This is Croesus of Lydia, and he's doing a libation that is in added red. That's probably more like wine on this ancient Greek vase. We can tell, by the way, his name, Croesus, it's in very faint letters. They're not very well preserved. That also would have been in an added color, probably red that's or white that's come off a little bit. And likewise, the drink that he's offering, either red or white. But again, the colors faded over time. About the gods sharing a drink themselves. When Athena offers Heracles a drink, perhaps we don't need to read it as a libation. In this case, I think it's more likely that Athena is simply pouring Heracles a drink because it's a drinking vessel, Dionysus is cantharos, with handles and feet. And it's sometimes hard to tell the difference between the libation and a simple social drink because sacrifice was indeed done at the outset of a drinking party called in ancient Greek symposium. We use the Latin word symposium, but it's also in Greek transliterated symposion. The symposium wasn't a simple social drink, but one done in a religious context, as revealed not least by the so-called triple libation, for which Xenophon is perhaps our best source. He tells us that each crater was drunk in honor of particular deities to whom a libation is given: Zeus and the Olympians on the first, heroes on the second, and Zeus Soter, that's a particular aspect of Zeus, on the third. And then they also had food to accompany it. In my next video in this series, I'll talk more about the symposium. Thank you.